Hey guys, and welcome back to Devil Dog Off-Road. On this week, we're going to install this Atlas 2 transfer case into my 86 Grand Wagoneer. As you guys already know from watching past videos and Instagram, I do not have a stock engine in this. It has a 5.2 V8 out of a 96 Grand Cherokee, so we got a special adapter plate for this transfer case to fit into that transmission. One of the things I already did beforehand was install this clocking ring and got the transfer case put in. I suggest you just put in 2 bolts to start with, because you will have to move it around and get it where you like. I tried to get it as flat as possible between the frame rails, that way it's a better angle and you can go over stuff, especially when I build the skid plate for this later on. The transfer case I got has a 3.8 to 1.4 gear ratio. I could have gone with more gear, but I wanted a little bit more wheel speed, so I went with that gear ratio. I got the cable shifters for it, since I built a custom center console for it and wanted to be able to have the options of being able to move the shifter levers in it to a different location. So let's go through this and put this bad boy together and get it installed and make this Jeep 10 times better than it is right now. Thing is, first, you always want to make sure you have all the instructions you need. That way you have them near you. I like to lay everything out, make sure I have an inventory of all the parts I need, and then get ready to do the project. This step, I'm going to be removing the plug on the side of the transfer case and installing the speedometer into the side of the transfer case. Now, depending on the model vehicle you have, there's different options, and they even have a block-off plate for this transfer case if you use a different type of speedometer. So either way, you have many options. It's important to use Loctite on all the parts when putting this transfer case, cables, or shift levers, depending on what you have. Because of all the vibrations in the vehicle, you want to make sure you have Loctite on everything. We're going to be installing the base plate onto the transfer case. Once you have all 3 of those bolts put on and tightened, you want to thread on the nut onto the awl thread about 1/3 of the way, and then turn the awl thread until it bottoms out. Then go ahead and tighten down your jam nut. Ahead and slide the extension tube over that, and slide the extension tube bracket over that, and tighten it down with the serrated nut lock nut. With one side of the cables, you want to remove the 1/4 inch nut and go ahead and discard it, because we won't be needing it on this side of the transfer case. Also, go ahead and remove one of the 5/8 lock nuts off of there so that we can reuse it in a second. Once we slide the cable through the extension tube bracket, we're going to use that 5/8 jam nut with the thread or two just to hold it in place while we move on. Once the cable's being held in place, we can go ahead and slide the outer nut cap over the cable, and then go ahead and start threading the cable nut onto the end of the cable. Now you want to thread it back far enough so that you can feel the end of the cable hit the back of the shifter. Then go ahead and tighten that down and make sure it's flush. You want to make sure the cable is all the way back on inside the shifter lever before you go ahead and tighten everything down. Once that process is complete, go ahead and repeat it on the opposite side. Then you can tighten everything down. You want to next shift the transfer case into low range. I took a flat punch and a dead blow hammer and hit the cap nut and made sure the transfer case shifted into low range on both sides. Then we can go ahead and pull back on the main part of the cable. Not too hard to shift it back into neutral, but just enough where there's pressure on it, and you can go ahead and tighten down the jam nuts. It's a good idea to go ahead and tighten the inner jam nut first, then go ahead and tighten the outer. That way it leaves the right amount of gap between the cable and what you need with the transfer case. After which step, go ahead and shift the transfer case back into neutral. Here I'm using a dead blow hammer to hammer in the bushings that go inside the handles. There's one on either side of both handles. Now that we're moved on away from the transfer case, on the other end of the cables, you want to get both cables, remove one of the 5/8 jam nuts, discard it, we won't need it anymore. Then you're going to slide the barrel retainer plate over both the cables. Once you do that, you can thread on both the cable barrels onto the shifter cables. Here I am going and sliding both handles into the shifter body where both handles are facing opposite of each other, and then going ahead and tightening down the bolts so that the shifters are mounted to the shifter body. Next, you want to go ahead and screw on both the Hemi joints onto the end of the shifter cables and slide the jam nut down. You want to slide all of that through the shifter body. And I started all three of the bolts from the barrel retaining plate into the back of the shifter just to keep everything from falling apart. You want to go ahead and bolt through the end of the Hemi joint into the bottom of the shifter, regardless of whether the shifters are perpendicular or 90 degrees to each other, the handles in the cable. You're going to adjust that in a second. After both have been bolted down, then you can go ahead and adjust the cable barrels on the shift cables and get both levers to go 90 degrees from your shift cables. That way you have a nice 90-degree angle when you're looking down the shifters into the shifter body, and the cables should be a good 90 degrees.
Now beforehand, I went ahead and measured and cut the opening in the bottom of the floorboard where I wanted my shifter levers to come through, as well as I went ahead and measured and cut the top on my center console for the shifters to come through there once everything was installed. After all that was done and assembling the transfer case and shifter cables, went ahead and married up the transfer case to the transmission and sent the shifter levers through the floorboard. Once everything was back in place, the top was back on the center console, went ahead and slid the metal plate inside the rubber boot on the bottom edge, lined it up over and put the boot over the shifters, and used self-tapping screws to go through the shifter boot, through the metal plate, and into the center console. Then go ahead and put the jam nuts on. Do not use Loctite on the shifter knobs. You want to be able to adjust them later on or take them off if you need to do any kind of repairs or whatnot. So go ahead and screw down the jam nuts. Screw down the top of the handles whichever way you want them to face. Then tighten up the jam nuts. And final step is put the stickers on it. Make sure that you know which lever is for forward and which lever is for reverse, and high and low.
Well, as you can see, we got it installed into the Jeep. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I just want to touch a couple things beforehand. Advanced Adapter sends 2 quarts of fluid for the transfer case. You can put it in before or after. The only thing you want to make sure is the transfer case holds exactly 2 quarts, so don't overfill it. And on the sight tube, once you get it installed, you want to check, let it settle down. Once the oil sets on the clear sight tube, I would recommend put a zip tie or put a Sharpie mark on there. That way you can tell where the fluid level is, and if you need to fill it up, you can see that and see where it needs to be. Like I said, depending on how it's clocked on your car, you want to let the fluid settle and then go ahead and mark it. The other thing is they send the instructions, and I had all the instructions here. Go over them, read it. You can follow it step by step, and if you need to, you can go on their website for Advanced Adapters and find anything in case for some reason one of the instructions you can't read it. You can pull it up on your computer, phone, and look up all the instructions. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. So next week we're going to be installing the front bumper with the winch. Get all that wired in, so hopefully you like it. Like the channel, subscribe, tell your friends, and I hope to see you again. Thank you.